This case takes place in New South Wales in October of 1997. In a small rural town in New South Wales, two best friends set off walking. Their destination was a party. Although they never arrived, panic ensued, and what followed was an investigation which has forever haunted the small town of Bega. This video is sponsored, and a percentage will be going to a Victims of Crime charity and the rest towards a new studio.
Oh hi, I didn't see that. Are you like me? Well, if you are like me, keep watching. For me personally, my sleep schedule's been absolutely diabolical, and for years I've had a massive problem with staying asleep, because usually I'll wake up 8 or 9 times every night. But for the last month or so, I've been using this. So basically how Dream works is with 4 natural ingredients: L-theanine, melatonin, reishi mushroom, and magnesium. So every night I have 1 scoop before bed of the peanut butter one, that's my favourite. And for the first time in I don't know how long, I actually sleep genuinely peacefully through the night, and I haven't done that in a long time. I either sleep all the way through the night or I'll wake up just like once. It's made a massive difference with my mood. I've got less brain fog, I'm sleeping better, and I recover way better at the gym as well. And as well as my claim, there was also a study where 93% of participants had way better sleep with Dream. And the guy behind the camera liked it too. I let him have some and he enjoyed it. So if you genuinely want to improve your sleep, click the link in the description or pinned in the comments, and you can get up to 35% off your order. Thank you.
Lauren Barry was a 14-year-old Year 9 student at Bega High School. She was described as an incredibly happy and adventurous young girl, someone who had a deep love for the outdoors. She had a good number of friends, and one of these friends was 16-year-old Nichole Collins, a creative girl who loved her family dearly. Together, they enjoyed camping and attending social events. Over the last few months, these two friends had really been enjoying camping, and on the 4th and 6th of October 1997, there was a long weekend in New South Wales due to a public holiday known as Labour Day. For this occasion, the two girls, along with other girls and boys, wanted to embark on a camping trip, something they had done dozens of times in the past. Their parents agreed that they could do this, and so, on the 3rd of October, Nichole's father set up a temporary camping site just off the Bega Road. The campsite was only 3 kilometers from where Lauren Barry and Nichole Collins lived. This was the perfect spot, as their parents could check on them with relative ease. School was out, and this was to be a fun trip away for the long weekend. By all accounts, the two girls were having a great time with their friends. However, many of those in attendance were in relationships, resulting in the two girls feeling somewhat left out. And Nichole had only just recently separated from her boyfriend and was now single. Being surrounded by young couples made her feel a little down, and she began to deeply miss him, as she wanted him back. Nichole's ex-boyfriend was not at the camping trip. He was at a party not too far away, and so a thought popped into their heads. Why not go to this party and see if Nichole could rekindle their romance? Nightfall came. The campsite was remote enough that it was extremely dark. It got to the point in the night that the two girls became ever more tempted by this party. So at around 9 o'clock on the night of Sunday the 6th of October, Lauren and Nichole left their friends at the campsite and began to walk down the track to the Bega Road on their way to the party. They said bye to some of their friends and they went on their way, taking with them a bottle of alcohol for the journey. Just 10 minutes later, Nichole's brother pulled up to the campsite in his car to see some of his friends. He had just missed out on seeing his sister and her friend. If he would have seen them, he would have given them a lift to the party in his car. The walk to the party was quite the distance. Many of their friends assumed that the pair would give up on their way and likely just stay over at Nichole's house, and that they would probably see them in the morning. But Nichole and Lauren never made it to that party, nor did they make it home. The following morning, those at the campsite began to wonder where they were. They weren't seen by anyone at the party, and friends and family had no clue as to where the two girls could be. Did they get lost? Not likely. They knew their way around the area like the back of their hand. Did they end up somewhere else on their own accord? Again, not likely. They would have informed their parents somehow as to where they were. More time passed, and it became clear that something was horribly wrong. Right away, a search was conducted. Huge efforts were made to find the girls, hoping that they were just lost somewhere out in the bush, but they were nowhere to be seen. Panic spread amongst the community as the police took over. Everywhere was searched in the area. Days passed, and there was no sign of the girls anywhere. Then there was a discovery. Clothing belonging to Lauren was found on the side of an old road. It was Lauren's shirt, and she was wearing it when she was last seen at the campsite. But something was noticed on the clothing, a seminal stain on the shirt. This wasn't just a missing persons case. This was something far more sinister. An investigation team was brought in as the police began to fear the worst. Various states were notified of the missing girls, and a task force began probing any potential people who could be involved in the disappearance of the pair. A number of suspects were questioned, but they were swiftly released as they all had alibis. More and more names were ticked off the list of suspects. The parents appealed to the media, hoping that someone would come forward, but no one did. The only information that was really gathered was that a large pink television set was found discarded on the side of a rural road, and then it was gone shortly after. However, this lead of a pink TV would prove to be far more important than initially expected. But then, one detective received a phone call from a police station in a town just near Canberra called Yass. This detective picked up the phone and spoke with another detective who had heard about the case of the missing girls. The detective explained that around 3 weeks after the girls went missing, a stolen car was searched by the police in Canberra. It was found to contain maps of the Bega area. The people who stole the car had been arrested for the crime. He gave the names of the 2 detained men, Leslie Camilleri and Lindsay Beckett. Leslie was a 27-year-old career criminal with a history of violent offences and a controlling personality. Lindsay Beckett was 23 years old and was originally from New Zealand. He also had a criminal record, but was described as someone who was easy to control and had a low IQ. He basically did what Camilleri told him to do. Between the two, they had over 220 criminal convictions, and some were rather severe. These 2 men were very, very well known to the authorities. The task force decided to bring Lindsay Beckett in for questioning. Every potential suspect needed to be ruled out, as time was very much of the essence. Lindsay was questioned by the police. He claimed that on the night that the girls went missing, he and his friend Camilleri went to a music festival and then visited Yass and Canberra, and that he knew nothing about the girls apart from what he had read in the newspaper. One of the detectives then decided to do something. He mentioned the pink TV, asking Beckett if he had any knowledge of it. Up until this point, Lindsay Beckett had been rather calm, like he was having a friendly chat with the officers. But the second the pink TV was mentioned, he changed his tune. The detectives noticed that he appeared to be more tense than just a moment ago, almost like he knew the police were onto him. The detectives suspected that this TV may indeed be a part of this puzzle. With nothing concrete, he was free to go, but he wasn't off the hook yet. Investigators began looking into this TV lead. There were some undercover informants who operated in the area, and because the 2 men were known to be selling drugs, investigators tasked the undercover informants to gather information, and they discovered something that piqued their interest. The 2 men had conducted a drug deal, and part of the payment for this deal was a television. Leslie Camilleri was then brought in for questioning. He was already in custody due to a number of thefts he had committed. He was the smarter of the 2 men. The police quickly learned that Beckett was essentially Camilleri's weird little minion who would do whatever he was told. During interrogation, Leslie told the same story as Lindsay, that he had no clue about the 2 missing girls, but that he had read it in the papers. But then they hit him with a question about the pink TV. and asked him if he had been driving with one when the girls went missing. With this, Camilleri looked like a rabbit in the headlights. He panicked. He then refused to speak to the police any further, and he was led back to his jail cell. This was it. Investigators believed that they had their culprits. With Camilleri no longer willing to speak, the investigators just continued with their investigation, but as they were at the station, they received a phone call. The call came from the jail where Leslie Camilleri was being held. They informed the investigators working on the case that Leslie Camilleri was in his cell having a nervous breakdown. He was bashing his head against the wall and kept muttering something about a television. Having absolutely broken Camilleri, investigators brought the less intelligent of the pair back in, Beckett. One of the detectives brought with him a photograph of the missing girls. He showed it to Beckett, and he couldn't even bring himself to look at the photo. He too had cracked. He then told the investigators a horrifying sentence. "I'll show you where we hid the bodies." He agreed to drive with the investigators and take them to the exact spot where the two men had killed Lauren and Nichole, along with where the murder weapons were too. The bodies of Lauren Barry and Nichole Collins were found in a remote area of bushland near Fiddler's Green Creek, which is on the border of New South Wales and Victoria. The location was hundreds of kilometres from where they were last seen. The bodies of Lauren and Nichole were taken away to a forensic lab for an autopsy. Both men were arrested and charged with the murder. Beckett came clean, but Camilleri, he denied responsibility and tried to downplay his role, putting all of the blame on Lindsay Beckett. Investigators were able to piece together what happened that night. The girls left their friends at the campsite at 9 p.m. They walked down the dirt track on the Bega-Tathra road on their way to the party. The timing of what happened next is chilling. Leslie Camilleri was driving along that road with Beckett. As the girls emerged onto the road, they were spotted. If the girls would have spent 1 or 2 minutes longer talking to their friends, none of this would have ever happened. The two men pulled up and spoke to the two girls. One theory is that the girls got into the car on their own free will, under the promise of going to a concert in Bega. The other theory is that the men forced them both into the car. But there wasn't enough room, as the two men had with them the pink television set. So they discarded the TV on the side of the road and got the girls inside. Once inside the car, the two men each produced knives. Camilleri was driving, and he told Beckett to kill the girls if they tried to escape. They drove to a road not far from the girls' homes. It was at this point that Beckett forced himself upon Lauren. Camilleri was also forcing himself upon Nichole. She was wearing her high school jacket, the item of clothing that would later be found with a stain on it. Once they were done, the car drove off again, heading in the direction of Marambola, with Camilleri still driving. They passed through the town and headed towards Eden. On the way, the men injected themselves with illegal substances. Before reaching Eden, they stopped off at a national park because Camilleri wanted to force himself upon Lauren again, and Beckett forced himself upon Nichole. A small black rubber torch and a tampon were later found in the national park. Lauren owned an identical torch, and the girls had it with them when they disappeared. After this, Camilleri told Beckett to drive. In the course of this journey, the men stopped off multiple times to do unspeakable things to the girls. Beckett continued to drive as Camilleri fell asleep, showing how unfazed he was at what they were doing. When he awoke, he told Beckett that they should go to Sydney so they could throw the girls off a bridge. About this time, he repeatedly said, "They cannot go back." One of the girls asked if they were going to be killed, and Camilleri replied that they were going to be tied up so they could escape from the scene, assuring the girls that they would not be killed. But then they turned off the highway over Fiddler's Creek. They then tied up the girls' hands with rope. The girls asked again if they were going to be killed, but the men repeated what they had originally said, that they were going to be tied up so they could get away and not be caught. They then led the girls through a dense bush for around 100 to 200 meters and eventually arrived at the creek. Where they were now was incredibly remote and isolated. No one would hear a thing. At the creek, Camilleri told Nichole to go to the water and wash herself to remove any DNA evidence. Lauren was also told to do the same. Camilleri then made both girls lie on their stomachs. He made gags by cutting strips of the jeans Lauren was wearing. Lauren and Nichole were then gagged. Camilleri used rope to tie Lauren's legs and pulled them behind her back, with her hands tied behind her back and a rope around her neck and mouth. Nichole was then taken and tied to a tree. Next, Camilleri pulled Beckett to a side and told him to go down and drown Lauren, and then go to the tree and kill Nichole. According to Beckett, he said that he didn't want to, but Camilleri replied by saying that if he didn't, he would kill Beckett himself. Camilleri demanded this and then walked back to the car, waiting for Beckett to do as he had instructed. And he did. Beckett dragged Lauren into the water by the ropes and tried to drown her. She struggled, and in this struggle, she splashed some water on his knee and got him wet. This enraged Beckett, so much so that he pulled out his knife and stabbed her in the neck. Nichole saw all of this. She watched her best friend die. As soon as Lauren stopped moving, he ran up the embankment to Nichole, who said to him, "You're going to kill me, aren't you?" He told her to shut up and cut her throat 3 times. He kicked her a number of times and held her down with his foot as she began to bleed out. After this, he stabbed her in the chest. Once Nichole was dead, he gathered up the ropes and gags and ran back to the car covered in blood. Camilleri asked him, "Did you do it?" And Beckett replied that he had. Then, Camilleri kept asking him, "Did you see the demon?" What exactly he meant by this isn't clear. Camilleri then began driving. They drove to Canberra, where they burned their clothing, ropes and gags after buying some clothes from a shopping centre. They then drove to Lake Burley Griffin in Canberra and threw their 2 knives out of the car window into different parts of the lake. One of these knives was later recovered by police. They then drove back to Yass, where the 2 men lived. They took Camilleri's car to a car wash and spent 6 hours or more cleaning it thoroughly. And later, they tried to retrieve the pink TV, but by the time they got there, a young couple had found it and taken it for themselves, not knowing the sinister reasons as to why it was left there on the side of the road. The couple later came forward, and the TV was handed in to the police. With some clever investigatory work, they found that the TV was sold to someone in a second-hand shop, and then was given to the 2 killers as payment. This serial number on the television matched records linking it to the perpetrators, more evidence linking them to the crime. And so, after they did all this, the girls were reported missing, and then some weeks later, the 2 men were arrested, and Beckett confessed. Following the discovery of the bodies and Beckett's confession, they pressed Camilleri for the same confession. However, he claimed that he had nothing to do with the murders, but said he was in the car, but he didn't do anything sinister to the girls. He claimed Beckett had injected him with all manner of illegal substances, and that because of this, he fell asleep. He claimed that when he awoke, Beckett was driving the car on the road between Bega and the beach. He said Beckett stopped the car and talked to 2 girls who got in the back seat after Beckett had taken out the television set and put it on the side of the road. He then claimed he passed out again, and when he came to, he saw Beckett covered in blood. However, the police just didn't believe it. For context, Camilleri was very much the leader of the 2, to the point that when Beckett stayed over at his home, Camilleri would make him sleep outside like a dog. Beckett was a person who followed orders, capable of evil himself, but he would always follow instructions from his boss. The police knew this, but they needed more proof, and they had it. As I mentioned earlier, a jacket was found which belonged to one of the girls, and the jacket had on it a semen stain. This jacket was tested for DNA, and the DNA came back with a match to Camilleri. This was damning. He had completely lied about being asleep. Then a woman came forward. Weeks before the murders, the two men had picked up a woman in Canberra. They forced themselves upon this woman in the same manner that they had inflicted upon Lauren and Nichole, taking her down similar dirt tracks. Thankfully, she was able to run away from the two men after they let her go to the toilet behind a tree. She was able to run to safety and get help as the men sped away. They picked her up off a road. They got her into the back seat. They forced themselves upon her, and they were going to kill her when they were done, just like what they had done to Lauren and Nichole. These two men clearly had a modus operandi, meaning that Camilleri wasn't as innocent as he had claimed. With the jacket with a stain on it, and this woman testifying, along with Beckett's confession, the prosecution had what they needed. The trial would soon begin. Family and friends had to sit and listen in heartbreaking detail the horrors of what the two girls suffered that night. On the 26th of June 1998, Lindsay Beckett appeared in the Supreme Court of Victoria. Thankfully, he pleaded guilty to the murders of Lauren Barry and Nichole Collins. He was sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 35 years. At the time, this was the longest non-parole period ever imposed in Victoria. Camilleri appeared in court in February of 1999, and he pleaded not guilty. The prosecution called 70 witnesses, presented DNA evidence, forensic findings, and Beckett's testimony, along with the woman from Canberra. The evidence was damning. The trial concluded on the 10th of April 1999. He was found guilty. Camilleri was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. A fair sentence, but one that is rare in Australia. But tragically, this isn't where the story ends. In 2012, Camilleri confessed to killing another woman. Prudence Bird was a 13-year-old girl who lived in Victoria. She was born on the 26th of March 1978. She was described as a typical teenager, and she was close with her family and enjoyed life. But on the 2nd of February 1992, she disappeared from her home under extremely strange circumstances. She was last seen in her home, where she had left behind an uneaten meal and the television still on. Her disappearance remained a mystery for 20 years. But then in 2012, Leslie Camilleri confessed to the murder. There are a number of inconsistencies with his story. This could be due to the amount of time that has passed, or perhaps other people were involved. Tragically, Prudence's body has never been found. For this murder, he was found guilty and was given an additional 28 years in prison added on to his life sentence. Camilleri will never be free, but Beckett will. He will be eligible for parole in 2033 when he is 59 years old.